Welcome to another edition of Ozarks Voices. My name is Tom Peters, Dean of Libraries at Missouri State University. And our special guest today is Shirley Jean Haworth. Shirley, welcome.
Thank you.
I just learned the correct way to pronounce her last name. So thanks very much. So, you
can call me anything as long as you call me for dinner.
All right. Just don't call me late for dinner. So I'm working on a book about the Ozark Jubilee, and I'm kind of doing KWTO as, all the growth of KWTO, and then the Corns a Crackin' Hillbilly Variety Show of the 40s as kind of a precursor to the Ozark Jubilee. So I wanted to ask you about your family, especially your father, Herschel Speedy Haworth Jr. Yeah. So let's start with a simple question. Where and when were you born?
I was born here in Springfield, Burge Hospital, 1943.
Okay. And then your father was born in Springfield as well?
In a house.
Okay.
Yes. On I think, East Division. I think that's where it was.
She was born at home?
Yeah.
Was there a midwife, or was it?
I have no idea.
All right. And what year was that?
1922.
Okay. Now, his mother was Aunt Martha of Aunt Martha's Pancake House family.
Her name was actually Vancy Martha Wilson.
She didn't like Vancy?
No, she didn't.
Yeah, okay. And she was a native of Nixa?
Yeah, she, I'm not sure if she was born there or not. They came from the Tennessee Hills in a covered wagon. And Grandpa and Grandma Wilson did. And first they settled near Bolivar.
Okay.
And then they moved to Nixa.
Okay.
And then they had...
and you're not sure if Aunt Martha was born in Nixa?
No, I'm not sure if she was born in Nixa.
Yeah.
They had like 7 kids, so...
Yeah.
Six girls and one son.
Right. And the son was... Slim. And I've seen a stage name sometimes as Slim Pickens Wilson.
Well, they did call him that, but there is a Slim Pickens Wilson, but he's the movie star.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. So, I have seen, maybe it's an error, but I've seen him.
Yeah, some people called him that.
Slim Pickens, but Slim Wilson.
Yeah.
So,
his name was actually Clyde Carroll Wilson.
Mm-hmm. I don't have the facts, but I sense that Nixa back then was a pretty small town.
Yeah, very small.
And a lot of musical talent came out of Nixa in particular, and Christian County in general, going all the way back to the Weaver Brothers.
Still does.
Yeah. And now we got, I just heard Abby Waterworth's new CD, and she's from near Clever.
Missouri is loaded with talent.
Yeah.
Just loaded with it.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. Maybe, I guess, people in the hills years ago didn't have anything to do, so they all got into music and just passed on the talent.
And the Wilsons were a very musical family.
Yeah, they all sang.
Yeah. So what can you tell us about your father? What memories do you have of life with your father?
Well, to me, it seemed like a normal life. It didn't seem unusual at all. Now that I look back, yes, it was.
What was unusual about it? Traveling a lot?
Well, I had a radio show when I was 10 years old.
Yeah, on KWTO?
Yeah, and I thought, that was normal, I thought.
What time and
it was 7 o'clock on Saturday morning.
15 minutes, 30 minutes?
15 minutes, and it was me and Dad and Slim to start with. And then we got another girl named Vivian McCoy to join us, and we called ourselves the Speedy Haworth Trio. And it lasted until I was in high school.
You enjoy it, or would there get to be kind of a grind after a while?
No, I loved it. I did have an argument with Dad one morning because he thought I was singing flat. I think he knew who was singing flat, but he chewed me out. So I just walked out of the studio and refused to do the show.
While the show was there?
So they did it without me.
Really?
And then he never said a word. I went back next Saturday and did it again. I said, don't use me as an example. You know it was her that was singing flat.
You weren't on air when you walked out. No, it was before. No. Yeah.
No, yeah, it was before the show.
You were just
went on.
practicing, and he was chewing you out. And you said,
Yeah.
"I'm out of here."
No, don't use me as an example. He did that a lot.
Yeah. So, what was it like being a 10-year-old performing on KWTO? Keep watching the Ozarks.
It was fun.
So this must have been what, about 53?
I made $2 a week,
Yeah.
and my grandma sponsored it. She had restaurants, starting with one on Boonville and then the Corn Crib. And
Okay, so I want to ask you about that. So, where was the original Aunt Martha's?
the original, it was called, I forget what it was called. It was on the corner of, you know where Boonville is off the square? It was on that very next corner, that very next intersection.
Going north,
Going south.
going south.
Yeah, the building is still there. I don't
Really?
know what's in it, but
Which was it, the southwest?
it
quadrant
was the
of
southeast corner.
Okay, on Boone.
Or the northeast corner.
Northeast. I was going to say the southeast, I think, is
if
empty
you-
lot now.
If you cross by on the right side of Boonville, say you're on the south side of the square, and you
Right.
walk down the street, it was right on the next corner,
Okay.
where you would cross the street to get to the parking lots.
Okay. All right. Because I'd heard that at one point Aunt Martha's was on Jefferson.
That was the Corn Crib.
That was called the Corn Crib.
Yeah, that's when the Jubilee was going on.
Okay. So she had a restaurant before
Yeah,
the Jubilee era.
Yeah.
And then she had the Corn Crib,
while the Jubilee was going
which
on.
was basically a block south of the Jewel Theater.
Yeah, it was not too far from the.
I've heard that it's
Jewel
where the MSU Foundation building is now, that big concrete structure. We used to be a bank.
I don't know. I used to go to the YMCA on weekends, and I'd walk down. It was south of the YMCA.
It was on the east side of the Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was where the MSU Foundation is now.
But
So-
I'd go in there to get lunch.
Really? Did you ever work in there?
No, didn't work there, but I worked at the last Aunt Martha's
Yeah. Okay.
for a couple of days. She thought it was too hard for me.
Oh.
I spent most
fired
of my
you?
time.
She fired you?
She didn't. She just said, "Don't come back. You can't handle this." She wouldn't let me do anything. She just kept me sitting on the stool in the kitchen drinking milk.
Oh. How old were you then?
About 15.
Oh, okay. So, did you ever perform on the Jubilee?
No, never on the Jubilee.
Okay, but your dad did.
Yeah, and
Quite a bit.
Martha did,
Yeah.
and Slim.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever go to the Jubilee to watch them
I
perform?
went to it a couple times, but I was a teenager then.
Uh-huh.
And I was more interested in teenager things than I was. I mean, it didn't seem unusual to me that Dad was on nationwide TV. It
Yeah.
just didn't register with me that this was a big thing and I need to be there taking pictures and soaking up memories. You know, it just didn't register with me.
You were aware that it was national, it was live national
Yeah,
TV.
and my life had always had music in it, and Dad had always performed,
Performance.
so it just seemed like another gig.
So now there's this new fancy fangled camera in front of his face.
The only time that it really started dawning on me was when I was married and my husband was in the Air Force and he was stationed in Biloxi, Mississippi. And we didn't have a TV, but the people next door did, so they let us come over there and watch the Jubilee one night. And it kind of hit home then that, wow, they can see him clear down here.
Did you see your dad perform
Yeah.
from Biloxi, Mississippi? Yeah. And that's when it struck you. Oh,
Yeah.
this is a national broadcast. And it was live TV. So there
Yeah.
was, and you know, like today when they call live TV, there's an 8-second delay.
Yeah.
So if there's a wardrobe malfunction or something, or someone utters a 4-letter word, they can cut it out before it goes out.
Well, they did tape it, but it's
Yeah.
live.
But it was live back then. It was live instantaneous. There
Yeah.
was no, if you fell off or missed a line or walked off stage or
Well, you know, and Dad always kind of liked that because he said he didn't like doing the same show over and over and over again. Like, that's why he never wanted to go to Branson,
Yeah.
because they just repeated the same show and it had to be
Right.
word for word.
Right.
You couldn't even do anything out of the script.
Just stick to the.
He liked to do off the cuff things. And on that show, Red was all up for that because he was good at that. And in fact, most people Dad worked full of work.
Yeah.
You could just throw a joke in, or you could
Yeah.
drop something and make the whole show around whatever it was you dropped.
Yeah. Yeah. By today's standards, it was not highly produced. they'd rehearse it. They'd have one sort of
They
dress
did
rehearsal.
rehearse a little bit.
Yeah, but they just kind of rolled with it.
In
whatever
fact,
happened.
one time Patsy Cline was going into the studio to record, and she said, "Who's the guitar player?" And they said, "Speedy Hallward." And she said, "Oh, we won't need to rehearse then."
Let's just do it one take. So did Dad ever talk about being on the Jubilee? And what do you think of Red Foley?
Oh, he loved Red Foley. He's like a father to him, and I loved him too. I got to work with him just a few years before he died. And he and I would just sit and talk while the rest of the band was sitting up and getting ready, and he and I would just sit and talk with each other.
Yeah.
And when I went to his funeral, I met Pat Boone. And Pat Boone says, "So you're the Shirley I hear Red talking so much about." I didn't know I made that much of an impression.
So you were friends?
Yeah, we were buds.
Yeah. So what would you talk about?
Just home life, family life, what we did at home and stuff like that.
Yeah. I read somewhere that Red really, he did a lot of different types of music, but spirituals were really special for him.
Yeah, he did a really good job on those, because everything he sang he felt.
Yeah. He ran into some trouble with the IRS.
That's what I heard.
Yeah. Did he ever talk about it?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
And he had a drinking problem.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's pretty well documented that he had a drinking problem.
Yeah, but I never saw him that way.
Yeah.
People like to talk, though, so.
Yeah. Back when you were performing on KWTO, that was live.
Yeah.
What did you think of it?
Didn't bother me a bit.
You were just doing it? Now, so that would have been 53 when you started doing it? You were 10 years old?
I don't remember the year, but I remember I was about 10. That year, that kid came out with "I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus." And I sang along with it while it was playing, and Dad heard me. So he told my grandma Martha, and she said, "We need to get her on the radio." So that's when I started. Well, I didn't really learn to sing till after I'd been on the TV show a while and watched myself, and then I saw the things I was doing wrong. So then I started practicing and getting better at the things that I was doing wrong. So by the time I finished being Rex Allen's girl singer, I knew how to sing, and then I lost my voice.
So what happened there? You just lost your voice?
Yeah, it's just not there anymore. I don't even have an octave.
Yeah. Did you? Did you hear something happen that you just? I've never sung, so I don't know. But
I think just lack of use.
Yeah.
Because.
You didn't overextend it, overexert yourself.
No, just not using it.
Yeah. You lost it.
Because after Rex died, the only time I sang is when I came back here and maybe do something with Dad, or sing harmony with Dad somewhere, or sing at church.
Yeah. So another thing about, especially the Jubilee years, was that there were some people that thought that Springfield was giving Nashville a run for its money. And,
I don't think we were trying to, but I think we could have.
Yeah. But your dad wasn't interested in Grand Ole Opry?
No, he didn't want to go to Nashville because he said he didn't like the music politics. He said they made you play what they wanted you to play. They made you play it in the key they wanted you to play it in.
Yeah.
And over and over and over again, and he didn't like that. He liked just going around and playing for somebody. Even if people got up and danced, the more they danced, the more they liked the music.
Yeah.
He didn't care where he played, who he played with, or what he played. He just wanted to do it.
Really? He just liked to play?
So when Porter went to Nashville, Dad didn't go, and his excuse was that they didn't have a school for our retarded brother. But that's not the real reason. He just didn't want to be in Nashville.
He didn't like the whole Nashville scene.
No.
Yeah.
That was not his.
And the strictures. I mean, they were, from what I know, they were pretty conservative.
Yeah, there's just routines they had to follow, and he just didn't like the routine of it. And then whoever was in charge would tell him what to play, when to play, and how to play it. And he didn't want that.
And at the time was very, if you got 2 songs and you were asked to do 3 songs, that was like a big win or something.
Yeah, he liked traveling. Like, he was Rex Allen's guitar player for a while, and bus driver, and he flew with him too, and he did Red Foley. And then there was a girl named Bonnie Nelson that he traveled with, and then he traveled with Leroy Van Dyke for a while.
But he liked to travel. He never
Oh,
tired.
he loved it. No.
Never tired of traveling.
He had a map in his head. So he could be, we had a motorhome for a while, and he would be laying on the bunk. Somebody else would be driving, and he would know if they missed a turn.
He would say,
And he
take
would
a
get
left,
up.
quarter mile up here.
Lonnie, you just missed a turn. You're headed for El Paso.
He just had one of those people that just had that inner map, and he always knew where he was. And,
the only time I could sleep on the motorhome was if Dad was driving. If somebody else was driving, I had to ride shotgun.
So was it always a motorhome? Well, when a motorhome?
No, he got the motorhome after he started working for Rex. And after in 1970, I started traveling with Rex. And he got the motorhome after that. And because it would hold all the band members and all the instruments and all our clothes and everything.
Right.
And it was fun.
Before then, it was just a
Station wagon.
Yeah. Never train or plane.
No.
Rarely. Yeah.
Once in a while, Rex would fly me somewhere. I think, in fact, the 2 or 3 times that I flew, it was Rex. And once was in a little twin-engine small plane, 10-seater.
That frighten you?
No, I loved it. My dad was a pilot,
Oh.
and he had a single-engine plane before I was even in school.
Yeah.
And he used to take my sister and I up flying. We lived out in Brentwood
Yeah.
over there, and he would fly us over the house, and we'd see Mom out hanging up clothes.
Yeah.
He'd try to scare us.
Was the airport you used on East Division there, the old airport?
You know, I don't remember where he took off from, but I think it probably was.
Yeah. I think there was another one, private field down there about where there was a drive-in movie theater down there about Sunshine and Glenstone. Just
Yeah,
north
I don't remember where we went to get in the plane. I just remember flying it.
Yeah.
And my Dad said, my sister said, "Where's our house?" And Dad said, "Over there." And she went, "Where?" and pushed the wheel, and
What'd your dad like to do for fun?
Okay, hold on, wait, come out.
To
Wait, I'm
relax.
not gonna read it. I'm gonna screenshot.
Was he a hunter?
No, he didn't like to hunt. He did go with his dad. His dad liked to squirrel hunt. And he went with his dad because his dad wanted to, but he didn't really care for it. But he would take us to the rivers and lakes all the time. He'd take us down to Rockaway Beach, and he'd take us to
Swim,
James
fish.
River. We'd in a paddle boat.
Yeah.
And he didn't like fishing, but he taught us how to, and got us cane poles,
Yeah.
and we'd go down to James River and just have fun. And one time he owned a truck route, Speedy Express, and we would all load up in the truck and go down to the river and cook out and
Yeah.
splash in the water.
So Table Rock Dam was built 57. Do you remember the James River before Table Rock was built?
Well, I remember James River where you go down Sunshine,
Yeah.
and my grandma had a house, a restaurant up over the James River called the Cliff House, and it was just a little
Well, I think
river.
on White River. That's James
this-
River flows into White River.
Yeah, James River. It would just you drive out east on Sunshine, and
And then
it's
be
just
right
off
there.
to the left,
Yeah.
and,
Okay.
and it was full of snakes, and
Full of snakes.
yeah, I saw 3 of them swimming toward me one time.
Really?
Coming downstream, and I went, oh. Dad always told us to wear tennis shoes, and I'm sure glad that he did because I had to run.
Yeah. Get away from the snakes.
You said it. Everything I said is
And then so
everything I do is
your uncle, Slim Wilson,
Yeah, his dad's uncle,
Dad's uncle,
my great uncle.
your great uncle. What kind of interaction did you have with him? Did you get was he?
Oh
a big
yeah,
part of your-
he was just like a dad to me. You know, I got along with him well. We sang duets together, and he was a marvelous MC. He could come up with things to say when nobody else could think of anything,
Yeah.
and he was real good at that.
He substituted emceeing on the Ozark Jubilee more than once, quite a while.
Yeah, we were doing the Slim Wilson show one time, and
Yeah,
I wrote cue cards.
really.
So I knew what was on the cue cards and what I was supposed to say. Well, he comes out carrying a coat hanger and says, "Here, somebody sent you a wire." It just dumbstruck me. I didn't even know what to say. Now I know what I would say, but back then I didn't.
So the Slim Wilson show was after the Jubilee, 60s.
It
Into the
started.
70s.
It started in 1964, I think, and ran for 11 years.
Okay. 64 to 75. KY3 down there on Sunshine.
Yeah.
Live.
No, they were taped.
They were taped.
Yeah, we'd tape them on Saturday and Sunday, and we'd tape 3 or 4 shows at a time.
Hour long.
Half hour.
Half hour.
And I would type the script. Fred Raines, who was
Right.
the producer on the Jubilee, wrote the script, and then I'd type it up, and then make copies so everybody could have one,
Yeah.
and then take cue cards home and write the cue cards, and they paid me minimum wage for doing that. I think I got like $10
Yeah.
a week,
Yeah.
$10 every 3 weeks or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of the Ozark Jubilee folks worked on your dad's show. too.
Yeah.
Or your
Uncle's show,
great
yeah.
your great uncle's show. Yeah.
Yeah, we had quite a few of them on there.
Yeah.
Rex was on there. I can't think of anybody now. My memory's fading.
Yeah.
They-
Yeah. But
But
there's just a lot of both in front of the screen and behind the screen talent worked on that show.
oh yeah, yeah. I got to know a lot of the directors, and well, there was another guy who was a cue card guy.
Yeah.
Of course, they never get any recognition, but they're talented. They have to be. They have to know where to hold that card and
Yeah.
and what card to hold and all that. And
Right.
it's hard work. It's
Yeah.
not easy holding up a cue card and then shuffling it after you read it.
Yeah.
It'd be real easy to drop that whole handful.
Yeah. During the so both the TV show and the earlier radio programs, what I'm learning is that a lot of that talent, when they go out and play live at venues around the region during the week, and the radio program was kind of just almost like promotion for the traveling road
Yeah.
show. That's kind of how it worked, and you do that on a Saturday night or a Saturday morning, and then
And we did a lot of church suppers and on truck beds in parking
Yeah.
lots.
You ever do any pie suppers?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Hey, just tell me a little bit about how a pie supper worked and what you would do. And
Well, the town would just gather up to like a local church or something, and everybody would bring food. It wouldn't be just pie.
And it was a
They'd-
fundraiser.
Yeah, they'd bring all kinds of stuff, and we'd pick and grin a little bit, and of course they'd have some of them. Sometimes they would have games where you could play a game and win a cake or win a pie. We'd do that.
do they ever bid on pies? They have a bidding contest?
I never saw that, but we did play for a few auctions.
Really? Okay. Did you have an agent?
No. No, either
Your dad had.
Dad booked them or
Yeah.
Slim booked them.
Did your dad or your great uncle have an agent?
No.
Really? Not Top Talent or anybody?
Well, Top Talent was who they kind of
They'd use for their booking
went-
agency.
yeah.
Yeah.
But they usually got the jobs themselves.
Yeah.
Like when Rex Allen wanted Dad, he called Dad personally
Yeah.
and told Dad, I want
So
you.
Dad didn't have a manager or
No.
an entourage or anything
No.
like today, He just was everything.
Yeah, plain old Dad.
Yeah, he did it all. What about recordings? Did he like studio work?
He didn't really like studio work, but he did write a song once that we recorded with him, me and the girl that used to sing with us and her sister. And of course it never went anywhere. And I recorded Satisfied Mind with
You
Dad,
did?
Slim, and Bob. And then on the other side was a song called His Love. And Cy Simon was behind it. And so they made enough records to mail out to radio stations everywhere, and it was the pick hit of the week in Rochester, New York. But there were no records to buy because I was sure I wasn't going to be a hit, so he
Never made
just
it.
didn't make any. But I found that record on the internet the other day, 45, and I told the guy, I said, I'm the singer of that record, can I buy it? And he said, "You don't even have to pay me. I'll send it to you."
Ship it to you.
So he sent me the record.
Really?
I don't know why I didn't keep one.
Yeah, but now you have one?
Yeah, I have one.
Do you have a 45 playback turntable?
Well,
or-
I had Jan and Charles Lee put it on CD for me.
Okay.
Look, she gonna do the drive.
So you knew Cy Simon?
Yeah.
What are your memories of Cy?
Not very much. I just talked to him one time,
Uh-huh.
and he told me that I was married and having kids, and he said that would probably hurt my career. Well, I didn't really want a career.
Yeah.
I had one. I was
Now
a
you're
girl
starting-
singer.
Now
I
you're
traveled
starting.
with that.
Now you're starting a family.
Yeah, I didn't want to be a star. I wouldn't hurt mind being rich, but I didn't want to be a star. I didn't want the responsibility. I mean, if you're a big star, you're responsible for everybody else. And Dad didn't want that either. So we were just happy picking and grinning.
He didn't want that for you or for himself.
Either one.
Yeah. Anybody else in the family?
Well, my younger brother plays guitar, but he never would play with us. Don't know why. He was good.
He refused to play with you?
Yeah, he just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And then two of my sons play guitar, and one of my grandsons plays guitar.
No. Okay. What about some of the other local talent, like Zed Tennis? Did you ever meet Zed
Oh
Tennis?
yeah, Zed Tennis. Loved him.
Yeah. So I'm kind of fascinated. I don't
He
know
was
why,
a
but I'm
character.
fascinated by him. He died pretty young.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook friends with his niece or his daughter. I forget which.
Really?
Sunny. I think she's his daughter.
Is she still Tennis, or does she have a married name?
No, she's married. Her last name's Harmon.
Sonny Harmon.
I forget what relation she is to him.
Might be a niece, might be a
And then
daughter.
I'm friends with somebody who knows one of Chuck Bauer's daughters or relation.
Yeah.
So they want me to get all the pictures I can of Zed and Chuck, and
Yeah.
if I find any songs of them singing, let them know, let them have them.
Yeah.
So I do. I've got quite a few pictures,
Good.
and
Yeah.
you can find them on the internet. All you have to do is go to YouTube and type in Chuck Bowers, and there he is.
Yeah. What about Buster Fellows?
Loved him to death too.
Yeah.
He was hilarious.
What do you remember? Any memories stick out of Buster?
Well, there's one that I can't tell. It has to do with needing to go to the bathroom. Well, I can tell this one. They were, I guess, like in a Model A or something. And Buster said he had to go to the bathroom, so finally Slim pulled over. And unbeknownst to them, because it was nighttime, it was a drop-off. Buster stepped out of the car.
What's that first step? It's a doozy, huh?
Yeah, that's one of the clean ones.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of road stories.
Oh, there's some really hilarious stuff.
So, as you look back on it, what I think, today's, especially young people, just don't have any conception of performing live on radio and television.
No, they're all about the head banging and the screaming.
Right, everything's so highly produced, and it's visual and fireworks.
There's way too much going on now that they wouldn't even begin to appreciate a stage show like we did, because hardly anybody ever moved except Pedro Gonzalez. He would come out and play the frying pans and then do this little Mexican dance.
Right.
But the rest of us just kind of stood still.
Yeah.
Well, today that wouldn't go.
Just wouldn't
go. There'd have to be lights and music and dancing, and we'd have to have backup chorus and backup dancers.
And you say your dad didn't want to do Branson either? He wasn't attracted to
No,
Branson?
because they repeated the same shows over and over and over.
Yeah.
And they did it 2 or 3 times a day.
Yeah.
And he
And they wanted it to be uniform, so the crowd would get what they expected.
Yeah, Dad liked doing off the cuff.
Yeah.
Just name the songs you're going to do, figure it out in your head, get on stage and do it.
Yeah. And it sounds like your dad was, I don't know what you call him, performer's performer. It was all about the performance.
Yeah.
Not the business side.
His job was to make the singer sound good.
Yeah.
So he would watch them really close. And Rex Allen had a bad habit of dropping time. And Dad knew that. So he'd watch him, and when he saw him going to do it, he would make it sound like he did it on purpose. And he was good for me too, because I like to sing like Willie Nelson, offbeat. Just drove Dad crazy because I did that. He liked 4/4, straight 4/4. You know, just stay on the beat, stay on the beat. I remember one time when we were singing with a couple that weren't really stage performers. They did perform with Dad, but they weren't really good at it. I mean, they were good enough to pass, but he said, when you sing that Blue Roses, when we sing with you, stay on the beat, because if you sing off beat, these guys will get lost. So, okay,
so your grandmother, Aunt Martha, what do you know about her career?
well, she was on the Jubilee, and she was on the Slim Wilson show, and she was part of the Goodwill family.
Right.
And
was the Goodwill family, you know?
it started out.
Well, that was just a name, you know, like the.
Yeah, it started out as Slim and Martha and Uncle George, and then when Uncle George quit, then it was Slim, Martha, George Rhodes, and Dad. And that was a Goodwill family.
So she continued to perform off and on.
Yeah.
But you also had the series of restaurants.
Yeah.
And so, what was the name of the restaurant when it was during the Jubilee years?
That was a Corn Crib.
The Corn Crib. Okay. And what kind of, was it a diner? Was it?
It was kind of like a pancake house. They served kind of like the same stuff on.
Breakfast was the main.
They had like tenderloin sandwiches and
hamburgers.
Pretty much the same menu as a pancake house, except not quite so many pancakes.
Would Jubilee folks go down there?
Yeah. All their pictures were hanging in there, so that's where they'd go after the show to eat.
Yeah. And then when did she move out to South Glenstone?
See, that was in, I forget what year she got it, but she got cancer, and she passed away in '66. And so she sold it, I think, in '64 because she knew she had cancer. And she wanted Dad to buy it, but he didn't want to. Then he ends up starting one of his own called Speedy's Plantation over in on Seminole. You know, there's a shopping center on the the northeast corner of Seminole and Glenstone. There's a shopping center back behind a filling station there, and it was right in there in that shopping center. He didn't have it very long.
Speedy's Plantation.
He had pretty much the same menu as the Pancake House with a few variations, but he didn't like the business end of it. He liked cooking and he liked recipes, but he didn't like the business end of it, so he got out of it.
Really?
He said, "Business, that's for somebody else."
And he just didn't want to buy it. He didn't want to hire a manager to handle the business part of it. And personnel, I imagine, probably wasn't his cup of tea.
He just wasn't a businessman.
Yeah, he just liked to perform.
He did own his own trucking business, but he had the truck, what do they call it? Tri-Lakes Express. Was Tri-Lakes.
Trucking firm.
Yeah, well, that's where Dad started. It wasn't always Tri-Lakes Express. It was something else. And they would get dispatches out of there, and he would drive all the way to Gainesville and back every day. In a one-ton pickup with a wooden bed on it.
Really?
He'd pick up freight here in town and take it to towns all the way to Gainesville and back.
Really?
And I drove it too.
Yeah. What was that like?
Oh, I loved it. Scary.
Was it always the same route?
Yeah, we go down through Forsyth.
Yeah.
And that's before they built the bypass.
Right.
And it was curvy.
Yeah.
And you got a loaded truck on those curves, you know, and you're going, whoa. No, my husband was driving it one day, and we were on a bridge over water, and it blew a tire. And here's that loaded truck, and there's me, and I had our son on my lap, and there was another guy with us. And Jerry's wrestling that truck, trying to get it to stop, and it's trying to go on. The scariest thing ever. Then he had to change the tire in a loaded truck.
Right, getting it jacked up, and So when Aunt Martha moved her pancake house out to South Glenstone, it recently closed. But there was a smaller building right on Glenstone, and then the final Aunt Martha's is back off the street a little bit. Was the original Aunt Martha's?
No, it wasn't in that building.
Oh, wait,
it was always in the.
Because there was a sign on there that said Aunt Martha's.
Yeah, I guess they owned that building too.
What was in there? Do you remember?
I never even looked in, never even asked.
Okay, so that other building was always there by the time they moved it.
Yeah,
out there.
I wasn't the curious type.
Yeah.
I wish I had been.
So when you worked for 2 days at Martha's, was it at that location?
Yeah, and she had me this pink gingham uniform.
So this would have been early '60s. So you must have been about late teens or 20.
It was the late 50s. Because I was about 15.
All right.
And I was skinny as a rail. I mean, I looked like a starving refugee. And so she thought I needed to sit back in the stool and drink milk all the time.
Yeah.
And I said, can I go get that table? And she said, no, you here, have another glass of milk. Do you want me to put some chocolate in it? And I said, well, she's not going to let me work. There's no reason me coming here.
So she suggested you don't come back.
No, I just didn't go back.
That was fine with you.
And she wanted, I don't know if she wanted me to actually be a waitress, but I think she thought something better. There was something better out there for me.
Yeah.
My mother was a waitress there.
Uh-huh. She enjoy it?
Yeah, and she was good too.
Yeah.
She could line these plates all up her arm.
Oh yeah, one of those waitresses.
In fact, I think she started waitressing at the one on Boonville.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a toddler, and I got to run up and down the counter. And my mom's mom and sister came in there and saw Martha letting me run up and down the counter, and they had a fit. I said, you are spoiling her. She shouldn't be running up and down that counter.
You were literally on the counter.
Yes,
Yeah.
stepping on people's food and stuff. So they wouldn't let me do it anymore.
Yeah. But you remember that.
Well, I was told.
Did you ever know Willie Nelson?
I never met him, but I know he washed dishes at Pancake House.
Yeah, so the story I've heard is that he auditioned to be on the Jubilee
And was turned down.
Was turned down.
Can you believe that?
You know, I guess what I'd read is that Cy and I don't know if Ralph Foster was involved. They thought it was a little too edgy or something. You know?
It was because he sang off beat.
Yeah.
And man, how wonderful would that have been to have Willie Nelson on there?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of talent on there, but Willie
Well,
never.
to show you how naive I was, when Elvis came to Springfield and played at the Shrine,
Yeah.
Dad was the pre-show. Him and his group were the pre-show.
Really?
He asked me if I wanted to go to the Shrine and see Elvis, and I said, no, I've got a date. Can you believe that?
So you passed up.
I
seeing-
just wasn't in it.
You were just running tune, you know?
just wasn't paying attention.
So that was what, 57?
There's somewhere around there, 57 or so.
Yeah. And
And I didn't want to go see Elvis. I could kick myself 1,000 times.
And your dad was the
Pre-show.
pre-show for
Before
Elvis.
Elvis.
Now I'd heard that Elvis did not sell out the Shrine Mosque when he performed there.
Oh, I don't know. I just know Dad was tickled to death.
What'd your dad say about that?
Oh,
did you remember that event?
Yeah, he didn't say whether it was sold out or not. He just,
But he was impressed by Elvis.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
he thought he was good,
Thought he had a lot of talent.
and he did.
Yeah.
He said he just wiggles too much. And you know, when he was on the Ed Sullivan Show, they wouldn't show him except for the waist up. And now look what they show.
I know, they wouldn't want those hips to be wiggling on TV.
Well, they told me when I was on the Slim Wilson Show, there was a song I sang called "Lay Your Head Upon My Pillow," and no, it's later. Was it was either pillow or shoulder? I can't remember which. I had to change it. I had to change it to shoulder.
It was too racy.
It was too racy. And that's, you know, that seems like just yesterday.
Yeah,
And then you watch TV today and you blush, you know.
it's ridiculous. Did you ever meet Ralph Foster?
Yeah.
What did you make of Ralph?
He was a nice guy.
Yeah. Was he primarily a business person?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. I don't remember ever seeing him smile. He was just kind of businesslike. I wasn't around him a lot.
Yeah.
But everybody liked him.
Yeah.
And I'm friends with Si's daughter on Facebook.
Janie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. So anybody, I mean, are there any other stories about, you know, the KWTO years or the Ozark Jubilee years?
Everybody on Facebook talks to me about it, and I've got tons and tons of pictures.
Yeah.
And I'll do a throwback Thursday, and I'll put one up, you know, and everybody will say, "Oh, I used to listen to them on the radio."
Yeah. That one you shared last week is just. So I'm working on a book, you know, and I'd love to include that photograph.
Well, go on my website and get my photos.
You
and
have a
you'll
website?
I mean, my Facebook.
Facebook.
And go to my photos, and there's several albums.
Do I have your
in there.
permission to?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can.
So we're
you
recording
can use,
this, so-
You can use any picture you
And
want.
I'll just say, you know.
Have you talked to Wayne Glenn?
Yeah. I'm actually gonna. Wayne just amazing.
I know he's a history book.
I'm like you, and my memory is not. It never was great, and it's getting worse.
Well, his is great,
I know.
and he's got so much in there. I don't know how he holds it all.
I know. So I'm actually kind of breaking it down. So like I'm gonna go interview him about just the Weaver brothers and Elvira. Just.
Well, he knows a little bit about everything.
I know, but you got to say, okay, Wayne. Today we're going to talk about Etch, you know, and kind of.
And he's got some pictures of the KWTO. In fact, a lot of the pictures that I have, he posted.
Yeah. Now, when you were at the KWTO studios, where were they located?
It was downtown on St. Louis and
Yeah, right across from the Strand Mouse.
yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an old dark red brick building.
It was an old funeral home, I understand.
Yeah, I don't know. I know there was a Quonset Hut coffee place on the other side of the street.
Really?
Silver metal top on it.
Was it Casper's?
I was really. That sounds familiar.
Was it Casper's?
I was really young when I first went up there. In fact, I think I was about 5, and I was in the KWTO dial with my hands on a piano like this. And I didn't learn how to play piano until I was like 12 or so. So I have no idea
It was just a photo op. Yeah.
what I was doing there. But then they had me on the cover one time at Woolworths, holding up a wedding dress and looking in a mirror, because it was the June edition.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to put the dress on, and they wouldn't let me. They made me hold it up.
So you go down to the KWTO studios and 7 o'clock on Saturday morning.
Sing for 15 minutes. And we'd leave about, well, Captain Kangaroo came on. And when Captain Kangaroo came on, Dad said, "It's time to go."
And where were you living at the time?
We lived on Olive Street,
Olive.
2119 West Olive, just
Okay.
down from Studi School.
Okay. And then was that just, it was part of your Saturday routine? Then what would you go get breakfast or?
No, I'd take my $2 check and take my friends out to movies.
Did you get paid? You
Yeah,
sang?
$2 a week,
Did
and
you go collect
after
your pay?
after taxes, it was $1.60. And I could take me and my sister and a friend to the movies and buy Coke and popcorn with $1.60.
Uh-huh. So you go to Saturday afternoon matinee? Yeah. That was kind of your Saturday?
Yeah, we'd ride the bus and
Yeah.
go to the Fox or the Gilloys.
Yeah. So you must have played in the Jewel Theater.
I was there, but I
You
never.
never performed
No,
in the Jewel. What do you remember about the Jewel?
the movie theater. Pretty much it. I had looked back at the pictures now, but I remember going there one time. I don't remember if I had to get money from Dad for something or what, but I just really didn't pay attention. I mean, I
It was just a place.
didn't care.
Yeah. Did you go to the movies at the Fox too?
Fox, Gilloys, and Landers.
Uh-huh.
Dad didn't want us to go to the Tower Theater because he was union and the Tower Theater was non-union at that time.
Oh.
So he wasn't supposed to go to the Tower. But when the Hindenburg movie came out, we went there to see it.
You got a special Hindenburg dispensation to go to the Tower Theater. So your dad was a proud member of the union?
Yeah.
Now, what performer union?
It was the local musicians union, and he complained about it one time because they were somewhere out west, and he wanted to carry his own instruments in, and they told him no, he was union, they had to do it.
Yeah.
And he said, you lay one finger on that guitar and you'll lose it. So he carried it in. He said, I don't let anybody carry my stuff.
Nobody touches my guitar. Was your dad performing? There was a big strike. I want to say in '48 there was a strike that went on for almost the entire year.
I don't remember.
Okay. He never talked about striking or
No, he didn't even talk much about when he was in the Army, except that he taught people how to shoot guns and how to fly.
Uh-huh.
And he was in Jamaica for a while with my uncle.
Uh-huh.
And when my uncle left Jamaica, he left a bicycle for Dad, so Dad had a bicycle to ride around.
Uh-huh.
And that's pretty much about all he'd say about the war. Now, he did like to watch war movies and war documentaries, and he ordered that book, the set of books that come on World War II. They would advertise them.
Time Life
Yeah,
books.
he ordered all those.
Yeah. But he never talked about it as a
No.
peak experience. Or,
No.
as he looks back on his career, did he have, fond memories? Did he?
He loved everything he did, and he was watching a video of he did a video with Leroy Van Dyke one time in Nashville at the there goes the memory. Anyway, the Mama Babel and the Carter family performed before they did, and it took them like 3 hours to do a half-hour show.
Right.
Well, Leroy was so well rehearsed, they got up there and they did it nonstop, one shot,
Right.
in 30 minutes. So they had it on a video and it was on a CD too. And I was playing the video for him one time, and he said, "Now welcome Leroy Van Dyke." He starts playing, and Dad said, "Is that me?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'm not bad." I said, "No, Dad, you're great. I told you." He just didn't believe that he was all that much. He just couldn't understand.
Very humble. He just enjoyed playing.
Yeah,
and
he loved people.
Yeah.
In fact, the more people he was around, the better he liked it.
Yeah. Did he have any? Were there groupies back then?
Oh, there were some that, when we went to Wilcox, Arizona for Rex Island Days, there were a few young people that hung around there, young girls that hung around there. But we had to run them off.
Right.
Mom says, "I'm glad you're traveling with him." And Dad's excuse was, "I can't, my daughter's here."
Well, it's been a pleasure conversing with you, and I'll be in touch. I'm just getting started on this project, so I'll if I have further questions, or I'll ask you.
Okay.
All right.
And you can have any of those pictures on there. They're not just in one album. They're scattered all over all the albums.
I'll look through
So
them.
it's kind of hard to find them.
I'll look through them.
If you need to know anybody's names and I can remember them, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So I don't know why, but I'm fascinated by Zed Tennis and Buster Fellows.
Well, they're kind of forgotten folk.
Yeah, and
And they were really super talented.
Yeah, and it was to me like especially the Jubilee it was a combination of national talent and local talent.
Bob White played the bass.
Yeah.
He had perfect pitch, and you could tune your instrument to his voice. He knew.
Really?
You'd say, "Get me a B flat," and he could hit it.
He could hit it. Huh?
And I'd never met anybody like that. I think Dad was pretty close to having perfect pitch too, because he could tune his guitar without.
But Bob had perfect pitch.
Yeah, and me and him and his son Craig were singing in the back of the bus one day, and he'd say, "Okay, here's your note, and here's your note," and then we'd start singing. And he just blew my mind, and he had a beautiful voice. I've got a recording of him singing, "Don't worry, I I'm going to throw a. It's like a pity party.
Yeah.
Then and he also sang. Well, I'll tell you what, this is really bad, and I'm taking stuff that's supposed to help your memory.
Yeah. I'm the same way. So I forget. Oh, what's his name? You know.
You laid been blue, no. That's one that he sang. That he does a gorgeous job on.
You know, there's so much talent on the Jubilee. You ever meet Porter Wagner?
Oh yeah.
What'd you make of Porter?
Well, he lived here in Springfield, and he had his oldest son and I were friends. They lived in a little apartment, and then he became Porter Wagner.
Yeah.
And of course, after Satisfied Mind was such a big hit, he was invited to Nashville. And Dad was part of the original Porter Wagner trio, and Dad didn't want to go to Nashville. So Porter had to get someone else.
Said thanks, but no thanks. Brenda Lee, did you ever meet Brenda Lee?
Yeah.
What do you remember of her?
She was loading up in our car one time. They were going on a trip, and she found a quarter in the floor of our car and kept it.
You saw her do it.
Well, it made me so mad.
And the quarter back then
I went
was,
and told Mom. I said, Mom, she took a quarter out of the floor. She said, shh, say nothing. Of course, she was, what, 10 or 11 back then.
Yeah.
But it really burned me up. But then later, she grew up into a fine young woman. But I had a friend, my boyfriend, Richard Joy, in the 7th grade, used to go roller skating where she was. And she would trip him.
Really? So she was kind of a little rascal.
She'd stick her leg out and trip him.
Really?
He said, next time you see Brenda Lee, tell her I owe her one.
You tripped my boyfriend. Where was that? Where was the roller rink? Do you remember?
It was Doling Park.
Oh, Doling Park roller rink. Well, again, thanks very much.
Well, you're welcome.